Hi, I'm Joyce Landry, and welcome to the fourth program in our series, The Future of Cruising Sustainable Ships. First, I want to tell you a little bit about the technology. This is a crowdcast program, and for those of you who have been on it before, I can already see that you have found the chat feature on the right-hand side. Feel free to leave a chat there. If the technology becomes a little bit bothersome to you, you can always hit the little caret at the top, and that will minimize the chat feature. At the bottom of your screen, there is an Ask a Question button. And that's where you will ask a question that will then be read at the end of the program to our guest today. If you like a question that's already been asked by somebody else, you can feel free to rate it and click on it. And that way, those questions that are the most popular will rise to the top, and we'll make sure that we take care of those first, as those will be the most urgent. So when we first started this series back in May, we, like others, were looking forward to getting back to normal soon. It's now almost the end of the summer, and we're not quite there yet. Yet, in fact, the new normal is where we are. And the new normal, we feel, is all about sustainability and health and safety, especially in the tourism industry. And from our COVID-19 experience, we realized that this is really our future. The future is depending on us to be a healthier and a more sustainable society. So the cruise industry is right there and right at the forefront of it as well. So today we'll learn about the sustainable practices of Royal Caribbean Group, one of the top 3 cruise lines in the world. They are pioneers of ocean sustainability in our industry. And many may not realize that they established the Save the Waves program back in 1992. That was 28 years ago. And that was to focus on ocean waste management well ahead of anyone else, ahead of their colleagues and ahead of any of their competitors in the industry. They've come a long way since then. And here today to tell us what the future of sustainability holds for Royal Caribbean is Nick Rose, Director, Environmental Programs. Nick is responsible for environmental programs and compliance, shoreside and shipboard, for over 50 cruise ships across 6 brands operating globally. I'd like to welcome Nick to the program right now. Hey, Nick.
Hello, Joyce.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing terrific today. Well, I just made an introduction to tell a little bit about Royal Caribbean, but I'd like the people to know a little bit more about you personally. We understand that you joined the company back in 2005 as an environmental officer on board the ships. Can you tell us a little bit about that and also how that led to your position today?
Sure. So, as I said, first of all, thanks for having me on. And having this type of discussion, uh, I think it's definitely a good way to kind of pass the time when we're in this, as you said, new normal. So in 2005, I joined Royal Caribbean through actually one of my family members was already on board as a navigational officer. She was the one who kind of told me, like, hey, they have this position that's purely focused on environmental compliance and really doing better for the environment. Being a environmental person myself, and that's what I was studying, I said, hey, this looks like a really good opportunity to go and kind of like see how business impacts with environment. What you learn in school may not be always the same of what is actually put into practice. So for me, it was a really good opportunity to see the world while also at the same time making sure that I'm still going through my normal professional development. And from there, I had a really great opportunity to actually come ashore and actually try to continue building the Save the Waves program, as you said, that was developed in 2000 or developed in 1992, right? And actually just be a part of the continuing to actually build it moving forward. And from that perspective, bringing someone ashore that had the shipboard experience was something that the organization was actually looking forward to, and it's something that we do even now as we continue to build the program forward. Both have people that come from outside of the industry, but also people that have kind of maybe worked on actual board a ship, because having that really good operational experience is really good.
Okay. Well, we're really delighted to have you with us today. And we know that you have a lot to say about sustainability. And you've brought some very interesting and very compelling slides with you to demonstrate that. So while we're getting those loaded, can you first explain a little bit about the new branding from Royal Caribbean? We're so used to seeing RCI, Royal Caribbean International, Royal RCCL, Royal Caribbean Cruise Line, and now we're seeing Royal Caribbean Group. What is Royal Caribbean Group and why the rebranding?
Yeah, so Royal Caribbean Group was just it's a new and modern way to talk about the actual parent company, Royal Caribbean Cruises Limited, and be able to differentiate that parent company from its individual brands. Right? There was a lot of times people don't understand, like specifically there are certain departments such as the environmental group where we represent the actual corporation, and all 6 brands operate under the same environmental program. So being able to talk about us from an actual group, it was just a new modern way to be able to differentiate the brands from the actual parent company. And it's something that we think people will start to have a better understanding of the actual differences between the group and the actual individual brands.
And some of our viewers may not realize that you have 6 brands because a couple of them are relatively new. Now, Silver Sea was a little while ago, but it only really just got, I understand, pulled into the entire organization earlier this year. And now you have Hapag-Lloyd. So you have a German cruise lines and TUI. There's more to Royal Caribbean than meets the eye. So I do understand the global nature of it, and you pretty much cover the globe now.
Yes, we do. Like I said, we have 6 different brands that operate many different sectors of the cruising industry, from large ships to small ships to expedition ships. So we feel that it's probably a very good collective of actual brands moving forward.
That's great. That's great. So let's talk about your sustainability, the targets and your philosophy right now.
Sure. Yeah. So the first thing is, like, our philosophy kind of goes by that for us, protecting the oceans isn't just an actual choice. It is a way of life. We build 30 to 40-year assets, right? And we've been around for 50 years, almost 50 years. So for us, it's not been our best business interest to impact the areas in which we actually go. When you look at what cruising offers, it allows you to see multiple destinations within one single week, right? So people still want to go to see destinations. So for us, it's really about protecting those destinations as we continue to expand where our ships go. We look at sustainability through 3 main philosophies. One is innovation, the second is continuous improvement, and the third is building it to kind of withstand time. So build it to be above and beyond compliance, because if there's one thing that we always know is life is ever changing, and the environmental and sustainability world that we live in is continually moving forward. So we always are trying to build our ships and build our program to where as those things change rapidly, we have some time to really look at it and make sure that we are approaching our programs through that same lens and building a little bit of an actual buffer, because at the end of the day, the world changes very, very fast.
Yeah. And I understand that uniquely, your chairman, Richard Fain, is very hands-on when it comes to innovation. I had the great good fortune of being led through the innovation lab over at your headquarters by Richard Fain one day, and to show us a virtual tour of the newest ships coming out. It's fascinating. And he just is so excited about it. You can see why there's so much investment here.
Yeah, no, like it's actually one thing that he always is like striving by. For those who have had the chance to either meet Richard or to have a conversation with him, he's very much a technological person, and he believes that innovation should be a part of everything in kind of which we do. The building you're talking about is actually called the iLab, or the Innovation Lab, and it was purpose built to make sure that when we are building all of our new ships, with Celebrity Edge being the first ship that was totally built within it. It was the first ship that was built using 3D models completely. There was no 2D paper models. Everything was done during using the actual 3D system. So it allows you to have a more hands-on way of building ships, but also we use it for a lot of our retrofit programs too. So it allows us to take a space we currently have and make sure that if we are going to retrofit it, what it actually feels like and what it will actually look like. So it's a very unique way of building systems. So through those same principles or philosophies, we look at our sustainability through 4 main focuses. The first one really is the focus of the world at the moment, and that is emission reduction. The second one is destination stewardship. We feel that being good stewards of the destination or the destinations where we visit is really the number one goal. The third one is the sustainable sourcing, and then finally, what are you doing with everything that you are generating on board? So waste being the actual final focus, but really was the first focus of Save the Waves some 28 years ago. And for us, it that kind of like solidifies where we are. So as we move along, we'll be able to talk about each one of these individually. So if we want to get into the emission slide, it's really focusing on the way we look at emissions. We look at it through two different levels. One is operationally. The other one is external. What do we do with all of these ways that we can reduce emissions? So if you look at our history since 2005, we have been able to either build ships or retrofit ships to use fuel, which is the main generator of emissions, the most efficient possible. So for us, we were able to achieve a 35% reduction from a 2005 baseline, and that was driven mainly based on changes to our operational profile or the innovation of our ships as we've gone down the road the last 15 years. Right. So for us, that was really the actual number one driver. But we didn't just stop there. We also understand that there are certain things that we can't reduce right now because we are a mobile company, right? We do move. So we, as part of our continuing improvements and part of our commitment, we also looked at, how can we look to offset some of the emissions in kind of which we are at. So in early 2017, we worked with our partner Southern Company to actually purposely build a wind farm in Kansas that will allow us to offset between 10 and 12% of our total carbon footprint. That's around 550,000 carbon offset credits. And the actual wind farm is 62 turbines large, covering a very vast area within Kansas, and actually can produce somewhere between 750 and 800,000, 800 million kilowatt hours annually. For those that kind of like numbers, like I am, I'm a kind of a numbers person. That's upwards of around 72,000 homes generated annually. I mean, it's a very big number. But again, it was just one of our steps forward of making sure that we are continuing to look at all types of ways that we can be better stewards of the environment, specifically on the emissions.
Your connection to wind farms was a completely new information for me. I was not aware of that. So I find that very impressive, and I'm sure that other people will feel the same way. Anyone who's been in the industry for a long time remembers ships all over the world just with this. You would kind of know an iconic picture of a ship was that they were trailing smoke behind them. That's how you knew the ship was moving. It was even in brochures. It was kind of a classic, iconic look of a ship. And now that's not that way anymore. And I just was traveling down by the port of Miami recently, and there are some vessels that are there that are in a hiatus, and there's nothing at all that's entering into the atmosphere there. I mean, they're clean. We know they're burning there because they have to be, still operating to keep the air conditioning going and so on while they're on hiatus. But still, it's a very clean look now in the ports, and we don't see that anymore. And I know that your company has had a lot to do with being on the forefront of that.
Yeah, like I said, we understand that we do have that we as operating cruise ships do have impacts. We are burning an actual fuel, but we are always trying to strive to make sure that we are doing the best with the fuel, but also that we are limiting the visual nature of it as actually well. So that's on the forefront of kind of where we want to be, and it's something that we strive for every single day.
Mm-hmm.
As you go to the next slide, and which talks about focus 2. So focus 2 was more of sustainable destinations. Now, people have always asked us, well, destinations and, what about your ships and stuff like that? The way we've always looked at it is we had to start with making sure that our ships were to the best of their ability. But we also want to have some touch points with the destinations in which we visit, right? We are bringing millions of people cruising to actually different destinations. And by being able to focus a little bit on destinations, specifically when it comes to tour operations, as well as the destinations themselves, helping them become more sustainable. It was one of the areas of focus that WWF, our largest partner when it comes to sustainable initiatives, really wanted to actually focus on too. They then brought along an organization called GSTC, the Global Sustainable Tourism Council. This body or this organization really is the kind of gold standard for setting standards when it comes to sustainable destinations and sustainable tours. Partnering with them, we set out to actually set an actual target to where 1,000 of our tours that we operate would be certified to the GSTC standard. At the end of 2019, we're actually able to meet 1,500 tours. So we're well past our actual mark and actually drive to be where we want to go. One of the reasons why we feel tours was a really good place to start is that while not only are the tours that we use as an organization, but these are local businesses that will continue to be able to operate sustainably and offer the same program for whoever wants to actually use them. So it's us having an actual impact on the destination, even though, let's say, we may not be there every single day. So for us, it was really just an actual no-brainer moving forward. And then because we are an organization that wants to make sure that we are doing the best, we also took those same guidance to our two private destinations, Perfect Day Coco Cay, and also our private destination on Labadee, Haiti. And we have worked with GSTC, and we're proud to announce that by 2021, those two destinations will also be certified to the GSTC destination standard, which is a little bit of a different standard than the physical tour operators standard. And then the last thing that we did is really work with those destinations to give them a view of how should they look at themselves sustainably, right? There is a question. What does sustainability mean? So for us, working with GSTC, that actually lays out parameters of how destinations should actually look. It was really an actual win-win situation. And in the very beginning, we worked with Belize, Roatan, and Cozumel to actually perform what are called GSTC assessments. These are individual, let's say, audits or assessments where there's a third party goes in and actually shows them kind of how they would rank when it comes to some of the standards in which destinations would actually have to meet. And it's just one of our sustainability efforts to see kind of where we can take destinations moving forward.
Now, if I could just also point out, because we know something about the GSTC, it is very rigorous. And the tour operators that we know of who are a part of that and are also, your ground operators, they had to go through a very, very intense time to look at their vehicles that they use, to look at the fuel that they use, and the types of the diversity on their teams of people. I mean, they have to look at every single aspect of their business, and it costs them in time and resources and money to be able to be part of GSTC. So your requirement that your ground handlers have GSTC is a very, very, very high level of endorsement for the environment. And I particularly like, I see it's on your slide here, that you've removed your live animal tours, wild animal tours from any of your offerings, because that's something that is very near and dear to me. I'm always been bothered by the dolphin tours and elephant tours and so on, that are with captive wild animals. So it's really laudable for you to be able to do this, and we thank you for that.
No, yeah, it's like I said, it's continuing to advance forward. Like one of our pillars is continuous improvement, something that we're always looking at. And like as you mentioned, GSDC certification isn't something that you get overnight. It does take some extra time to move forward. So in order to help with this, we've when you go on board, you'll be able to see that there are sections of these tour operators that have a different section when it comes to our tour operations book, right? Like it's a sustainable one, so they are incentivized through different means of placement, product placement, stuff like that. So, but we in the end, what we felt, or working with our tour operators, we were able to work with them and say that it wasn't that they've gained more than just an actual placement, because they've gained within their own operations. So it was a very good partnership moving forward. So the next one is sustainable sourcing. So along with our partner WWF, one of their main focuses is to make sure that as we are consumers of the world, that we are consuming things a little bit more sustainable. So with WWF partnership and WWF's help, they were able to help us identify certain areas of our supply chain to where we could begin our sustainability journey. And those ones were really on the seafood side, where we work with them to make sure that we have a goal that 90% of our wild caught seafood is MSC certified, and then at the same time 75% of our farm seafood is ASC certified. They are probably the two most well-known certification systems. For one is for wild and one is for agricultural fish. But the really really big goal is the actual third goal, which is for us to obtain chain of custody certification for both of them. What chain of custody certification does is basically guarantees that the fish from whether either comes from a farm or from a wild caught, from that moment all the way to the plate, is certified to meet an actual sustainable certification. For those that do know anything about the seafood market, there's a lot of hands involved. It passes through a lot of traders. So having this chain of custody will allow us to really guarantee that from the moment that the fish is caught or farmed all the way through until the plate in which it is served on. And that was like one of the biggest commitments in which we could make. There were some other ones, obviously the whole sourcing perk from a gestation-free crate by 2022, and then sourcing 100% cage-free eggs by the same time frame, right? These are all of our commitments to continue to move forward with a sustainable sourcing program. And with WWF partnership, we do have some other thoughts on actually expanding this out to other types of commodities. So there will be more to come.
Yeah. And one thing about seafood and fish, for those who enjoy both of those, we won't have any if we don't do this. This is not something that isn't it a nice thing for us to do? What we're looking at for the future is there needs to be a supply for the world going forward. And if we keep overfishing and going to unsustainable fish, then we won't have any. So by requiring that it's sustainable caught, then you're really helping in that regard.
Absolutely. Like I said, it is the only way to guarantee that the source, the source is always there. And we're, like I said, us as a business, but also us as good stewards of the environment, we want to make sure that the fish are continuing to thrive. Then it gets into really the last focus, which actually where this journey began. The Save the Race program, as mentioned earlier, was founded in 1992. Its sole purpose back then was to really understand and make sure that waste management on board a ship was at a level to where nothing went overboard. If you even ask people nowadays what Save the Waves means, the majority of them will say, well, nothing goes overboard, because that's what it's always been known for. But Save the Waste today, is the larger umbrella of kind of where we get all this emissions destination sourcing. But waste management is still near and dear to our actual heart. And what we've been able to actually do with our waste management is we have a goal to be a 100% landfill free company. Currently, we are at 85%. What we found out when we started this journey in 2010 is that we need partners, and partners in that really comes down to the local ports. So in working with local ports, we were able to identify what we call green hubs. These are ports in the world that will take our waste where nothing gets diverted to a landfill, where everything is either directly recycled, it is reused, it is repurposed, or at the very end, it goes to a waste to energy facility. Now, one of the more misleading things about this is on Royal Caribbean and all of our brands, a lot of people don't understand necessarily what actually happens with the waste, because we are a single stream organization, meaning you have one bin. There's one bin of waste that is in your room. What you don't understand is below decks, that gets separated out into everything from glass to plastic to paper, cardboard, you name it. It is all separated, and then we will process that in these green hubs that allow us to eliminate waste going to an actual landfill. And one of the things that we're most proud of is, if you look at the U.S. average of waste that goes to a landfill per person per day, according to the Environmental Protection Agency, it's about 2.8 pounds per person per day. On board one of Royal's ships, it's 0.32 pounds per person per day. So just over a little bit of a quarter of a pound, or in this case, basically 2.5 pounds less than what you would do when you're sitting in your own home.
Oh, I think you just earlier said the key to that. You are separating it all for people. You're not asking them to do it. So in your taking on that role, you're making sure it goes to the right place. So if we all had someone like you to walk into our home and separate all of our waste and put it in the right place, we might have better recycling.
Possibly, yeah. But so I 100% agree with that. And one of the things that we are working with our partner WWF is that to making sure that we are also educating people, actually just not educating. I don't like the word educating. It's more of informing people, right? Of kind of what the actual possibilities are. What we found through this program is by working with local ports, because we've helped set it up in certain ports. Now that same process is available to the local community. So it is something that we are trying to make sure that we are leaving behind something even better.
Education is important.
Absolutely. And moving to the and we can't do all this. I think you might have heard throughout the whole presentation, one of the common focuses is partnerships. We can't do things without partnerships. And talking about one of Royal Caribbean's biggest partnerships is WWF. When we worked to do a partnership with WWF in 2016, it was one of those goals that we had, like, how do we reach out and make sure that we are working with an organization that has such a broad reach, but one that also can stand the actual test of time. If there's, when people see the panda, as most people refer to them as, people understand that, like, WWF is actually serious. What they didn't understand in the beginning is WWF's connection to the ocean. So for us, it was a seamless partnership to work with them, really to understand and help them force their oceans program, because it was just starting to come alive. And one of the things that they wanted to focus on was not only operational boundaries, which we've talked about, emissions, sourcing of supply chain destinations. They also wanted to work on the information side, which is really using our ability to touch 8 to 8.5 million people per year, and really, share with them how they can be better stewards too. And that's kind of how the WWF partnership really came to fruition, and it's something that we're really proud of.
Okay. Well, we have a short video that you brought about your relationship with World Wildlife Fund. In introducing it, I just like to say that it's not easy getting a partnership with World Wildlife Fund. They don't do that with any large corporation. What you had to do as a corporation to be able to get their attention was really demonstrate a commitment to the environment. So good on you for having that. It's a very unique designation and not something that is easily given.
Absolutely. No, it's something like, going back, it was something that our actual chairman wanted. And, it's something that we really strive for.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, let's go to the video.
Change is the only constant, but the right partners can drive positive change. WWF and Royal Caribbean partnered in 2016 to ensure the long-term health of the oceans. Together, they set ambitious sustainability targets to buy more sustainable seafood, offer more sustainable tours, reduce emissions, protect nature, engage guests in their efforts, and be an industry leader. On top of helping the company operate more sustainably, the partnership has supported innovative programs like new polar bear tracking devices, hawksbill turtle DNA identifiers, and fishery improvement projects. Royal Caribbean and WWF are turning the tide and showing together more is possible.
That was beautiful. And I know that your chairman was also very, very hands-on with this relationship and partnership, and he's extremely proud of it. So, it's a really good one. I believe the next and the really last area that we're going to be talking about is going to be the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and how many of those you are working on as a corporation. We too, as a company, are part of this program, and we have sustainable development goals. Not as many as you have, but we have a number of them that we focus our company on. So this is a global program, and it's something that we all can participate in. So please tell us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, what we set out to actually do is that, while a lot of us live in our own little organizations and really focus on what we do best, we didn't want to lose the actual bigger side of what the world is trying to get to. And by being a company that takes people around the world, we employ 70,000 plus people from 70 some different countries, nationalities, right? We want to make sure that when we looked at the overarching sustainable development system, right, that we wanted to make sure that we had the broadest touch. And while we do only have 4 focuses, we do touch many aspects. We in this case, we touch 14 out of the 17 sustainability goals. And for us, it was just really looking at it as how can we continue to have an actual impact out of our own individual operations, but also work towards making sure that people are fully aware that, hey, these goals do have tangible impacts moving forward. And for us, it was kind of a no-brainer to be able to partner with the UN and make sure that we are touching the ones that have the most meaning to us. It's one of those commitments that is driven by really our actual chairman and our board of directors. I've had the pleasure of having discussions with them, and one of our board of directors, who's the chairman of the environmental committee, is the former head of the EPA, Mr. William Wright. And for us, it's really working with him to make sure that we have the best approach moving forward.
Right. So let's now talk about how all of this is going to help to propel you into a healthy return to sailing as a company. And I wanted to just let everyone know that this will be our last topic before we go to the question and answer. So if you haven't asked a question yet, now would be the time to go ahead and ask that in the Ask a Question box, which is at the bottom of your screen. Don't put your question in the chat, because that won't be seen by us. You have to put it in the Ask a Question, and we look forward to handling those right after this last slide.
Sure. So yeah. So obviously, with the current COVID pandemic and where it stands, people want to know, where do we stand? When are we getting back? And for those that were able to hear our chairman on last Monday, I believe, during our quarter 2 earnings call, our all of what we're doing is being driven by this healthy return to sailing panel that is being led by two tremendous people, Dr. Scott Gottlieb and the former governor Michael Levitt. And it really is focusing on, operationally, what is the best and actual approach with that. Since the announcement of the healthy return to sailing panel, Royal Caribbean has actually also hired recently Dr. Calvin Johnson, who will head up our global medical program, as well as our public health. So him, along with this healthy sail to returning, is really the focus of how do we actually move forward. What you might have heard, while we haven't really put out specifics yet, there was some things talked about testing. Would we do testing prior to coming back? Would we not? These are all still being discussed by this panel of what's the best approach, for us to come back into. And we really hope and focus that prior to coming back into service, all of our protocols will be made public. It's just more of making sure that we're crossing all of our T's and dotting all of our I's now, while also paying attention to what's currently happening. There are some organizations that have started sailing, and we're obviously watching those very, very closely.
Mm-hmm. And we understand that there are a lot of protocols you can't talk about right now, but one that you actually announced even before COVID that you were starting is Muster 2.0, which just goes well in the COVID environment as well, because it actually, I'll explain a little bit and you can a little bit more,
Sure.
which is there'll no longer be a requirement for groups of people to meet on board the ship before the ship sails to be able to go through their muster requirement, that you'll be able to do this at home 24 hours before you leave for your cruise, or in the privacy of your cabin, or I should say the security of the safety of your cabin, so that you can do it alone and you don't have to be out in a big group to do that. So there's no longer a requirement to group everyone together. And I'd have to say, for those of us that are in the meeting planning side of the business, so we're always trying to work through the muster time. When is that happening? When is a lifeboat drill happening, to work through how we're going to meet up with our groups when we get them on board. So this kind of, you took something away that was always a little bit of a challenge for us, and made things a little bit easier from that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, like Muster 2.0 was actually started to be developed about a year and a half before COVID, but obviously it did have some of the protections that COVID was kind of asking us to actually do. Basically, what it is as you described, an innovative program that allowed us to take a process that was really developed for large groups and make it more personalized, right? So whether that's through your phone, through your TV in your stateroom, or even starting the process when you're in the safety of your own home. It allows you to go through and really look at the three main things that the drill wanted to actually go after. One is, what should you expect in the event of some type of incident? Where do you go? Like, where are you physically mustering? There's still a part of Muster 2.0 where you have to walk to your muster station, but you don't have to do it at that specific time when you start hearing all the alarms. You can do it during your own time when you're actually boarding the ship. And then the very last thing is it still shows you how to put on an actual life vest or a life jacket, but it does it in your own personal time, where you can actually pay more attention to it, while also feel more comfortable than standing in with a group of your most recent 100 to 200 new friends that you just met 20 seconds ago.
Yeah.
So for us,
this is one of those improvements that you have to look at and say, gee, what were we thinking? Why didn't we do this earlier? So you'll be doing that and probably leading the way to the entire industry changing their processes going forward. So we're really pleased about that. Nick, we have a number of questions. So we can see that there are that we've had a pretty active group of people on our chat and also in the question area. So we should probably take a look at those and get to those right away.
Sounds good.
Okay. So one that got a lot of votes here. Let's see. What is the biggest challenge that you confront implementing sustainable practices on large ships? And I'll say this because up until now in our program, we were focusing on smaller ships. So you're our first large ship, cruise line that has been on the program. So this is what people want to know. What is the biggest challenge that you confront implementing sustainable practices on large ships?
So yeah, so we look at it kind of two ways. While yes, having larger ships with more people does have some bit of a challenge because you are putting more people on board a ship, but we look at it as there's also opportunities. When you're on a bigger ship, your actual platform is much bigger, so you can put pieces of technology on board that can help you handle those areas better. You can put processes in actual place that can actually help you handle it better. For instance, if you go back, Royal Caribbean's first advanced wastewater purification system was on one of our larger ships. It was on, at the time, was a ratings class vessel, was the first one that got it. But the first purpose-built one was on Freedom class. So you're talking 150,000 gross ton vessel, right? It allowed us to put it on there because this is a large piece of technology that actually treats wastewater. By putting it on board that vessel, we had the platform to actually do it. And what it allowed us to do is to work with that system over the years to make sure that can we downsize it. And what we've done is we've been able to actually learn from that and actually downsize it and retrofit it on smaller vessels. So for us, it's more about not necessarily the actual what is limiting us. It's more of what opportunities does it give us in order to perform and perfect certain processes, right? So that's one way that we've actually done it. And that's why we think, bigger isn't always necessarily worse. It's just provides you more of an opportunity to work through processes.
That's great. Yes, I feel the same way. So the bigger you are, yes, the more challenges, but also the more opportunities and the more really resources that you have to go after that. So that was really good. The next question I was very interested in seeing because it's actually ahead of where we are right now because we have the celebrity Galapagos is going to be a subject matter for us on one of our live casts coming up in September. So one of the questions is related to this. Can you talk about sustainable friendly destinations such as Galapagos and how Celebrity Flora and Silver Origin were built specifically to comply with local regulations?
Yeah, so obviously, being one of the first that we have purposely built ship for the Galapagos, we were able to partner with the Galapagos National Park and kind of work with them to kind of look at and go, how do we design a ship to be the most sustainable ship down there? A lot of the concepts were stuff that we took from larger vessels, right? Like, when it comes to the advanced wastewater purification system, right? We learned that on bigger vessels, but we had to downsize it for that ship. But because we had such experience with it, it actually allowed us to make that come to fruition. So that was the first thing, by putting an advanced wastewater purification system on it. We worked with the builders to make sure that when we were looking at it, that the ship was using other forms of liquid waste to basically limit the amount of ballast water that ship would need. Operation, the ship doesn't use ballast water at all, so there is no, there's no worry of us taking water from one part of the island and putting it on another part of an island. So from that one is one of the ways that we've actually done it. And then the last thing, because we built it purposely, when it comes to how we handle waste, right? Galapagos is a very remote part of the world, right? And by being able to build it to where we can have better processing systems on board when we land it, we're landing waste to the island that the islands can then handle responsibly because we have the way to process it on board. And being able to do that from a freshly built platform, and take the learnings that we've learned over 50 years of operating ships worldwide, is probably the best reason why we were able to achieve it.
Mm-hmm. And again, we'll know more when we learn more when we have our program in September. So for those who are interested in that question, please come back. Okay, here's one. Should an important subject like sustainability and preserving the environment be something that the large cruise lines should be collaborating on? Isn't it in the best interest if these strides were being made by the industry in terms of regaining public confidence, working together?
So in short, yes. So I have the pleasure of being CLIA's chairman of its environmental committee. And I can tell you, whether it's safety, environment, or health, we do collaborate. We do share best practices. One of the main reasons why we even have an actual group is to make sure that we are getting together and actually having these types of discussions moving forward. I think the best example of it is our health return to sailing panel is a collaboration between us and Norwegian, right? We figured out that, hey, coming together is one of the best ways to actually make sure that we are all looking at this the same way. And we share, back and forth all the time. So in short, the answer is yes. And in short, we are. It's just with anything, it's making sure that we are still working towards a greater good, while also making sure that we do have some of the commonalities between brands.
Mm-hmm. Now, here's one that had quite a few votes, and it's something that has been on our minds as well. And what future plans does RCG have for curbing food waste? You mentioned waste as in hard waste, but what about the food waste of phase?
So as part of our partnership with WWF, we are looking at ways to reduce food waste of where it actually starts, and that's in the production and the sourcing of actually where food comes. And that's right. So for us, it's really about, right, because we operate certain eating areas such as the Windjammer, where food must follow really strict public health protocols. We are looking at ways to make sure that we are limiting that amount of food that would come to be food waste, right? So for us, it's really on the front end, is really focusing on how do we make sure that we are making enough food for enough people at the right time to where you're limiting that amount of waste that is generated from that very, very spot. So that's phase one. The second phase is really looking at how do you handle food waste differently, right? So we are looking sort of like one of our partners, Carnival Cruise Lines, who was the first one who did it on such a scale, also looking at using digesters to handle food waste, right? So that at the end of the day, there is no food waste that would need to be landed or handled in actually some way to where you're consuming the food waste that is generated. But for us, the real focus is, because it's also good business, is the less food waste you generate, the better. And that's where most of our focus is now. And we are using some of our AI technology, right, to help us with that path, is really to understand people's behavior and what people like to eat. So that's kind of where we're at with that one.
Okay, thank you. And I don't know how many more we can take. I'm going to look at my production crew right here and say, how are we doing with time? Maybe, okay, a couple more minutes. Can hang in with us here, because these are good questions. And a couple of these are technical. This one actually has higher votes for the moment, which is, how would you suggest that existing vendors with sustainable solutions and products in use on board vessels help Royal Caribbean Group share or broadcast these mutual steps and initiatives with your guests and the general public?
So yeah, it's always hard. Like we always like to have partners, and some of our vendors help us support it. One of the ways in which we do it, and I've been involved with many of them, is we're a company that likes to show people. Like it's one thing about talking about it, it's another thing of bringing you on board and seeing it for your own eyes. Joyce, I think you were telling me before that you've been through one of our behind the scenes tours, right? And actually seen how this works. And we do that, for many different avenues, but for the best of vendors, really to get in contact with me or get in contact through our sustainability channels. And we are always supporting vendors who want to put out, stories and stuff of how they're helping us or how we're helping them. So for us, it's really, we really want vendors and we really want people to understand what we do, because for us, it's always best if someone else talks about what we are doing versus us.
Okay, good. Well, how about a technical question here? We have a question from someone who appears to know you. Hi, Nick. And Jilma, if I'm not pronouncing it properly, I'm sorry, from Panama, and wants to know if you could comment on the fourth IMO study, a GHG study. What do you think about the increase in methane emissions and the use of LNG as a fuel? Do you see the use of LNG reliable in the future? Everyone seems to be going for it. What do you
Yeah,
think?
so no, so it's always, yeah. So the fourth IMO study was published, I believe, last week. We're still working through the 300 and some page document, but yes, in the very forefront, methane emissions has risen, but that's because more ships are turning towards LNG as an actual fuel. We believe as Royal, we do have one of our future classes of vessels that will be LNG. That's Project Icon. Working with our vendors to make sure that the engines in which we use limit the amount of methane slip that could come from it is probably the number one factor, right? So for us, we do believe LNG is the next fuel for shipping, but we also know that it's not the end fuel. LNG is a transitional fuel, right? I mean, for us to really meet the goals of IMO and meet the goals of the Paris Agreement, we know that we have to get to a place where there is either zero carbon or zero greenhouse gas fuels. So for us, LNG is a step forward in the right direction, because when you build an LNG vessel, you have to build it to meet certain safety standards. A lot of these, what you would call alternative zero carbon, zero greenhouse gas fuels, also must meet those same safety standards. So for us, it really is the next phase of it, but we do understand that we have to continue to improve the technology to make sure we're limiting the amount of greenhouse gases.
Now, I'm glad you phrased it the way that you did, because sometimes people think of a magic bullet, and when they go toward one technology, that's the it factor. But really, there we are so far still, as far as we've come, so far away from the future, and the future will bring so many other ways to be able to get cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. So looking at it as a phase is actually a great way to look at it. We have one last question. I'm going to slip this one in so that we don't disappoint anyone, because this had a couple of votes. And it's also someone who knows you. Good seeing you, Nick. This is from Ingrid Qualo. And saying, due to CapEx dollars being limited, are the decarbonization projects taking a backseat?
No. Obviously, right now, everything is kind of what I would call pause, just taking an effect of what, really understanding what does the return to service plan look like? What is COVID going to drive? But I think, for those of you who do know our chairman or do know how we operate, looking at ways to make sure that we are still continuing our path to reduce emissions will always be there. And we will always find ways in order to make sure that we are meeting those goals and those commitments. But I would be lying to you if I didn't say that based on what the return of service plans show, both from technology that we have to use versus some of the other considerations that we must bring in, we need to look at all of our sustainability goals and all of our sustainability targets and make sure that they're still feasible, knowing what we might or may not have to change. So people have asked me, like, oh, so what does this mean for your plastics role, right? And what we're trying to do with actual plastics. Right now, our plastics goals still remain the same. We're going to reduce plastics to where there are no what we would call single-use plastics. That's the goal. But how we did it previously might have to change. For instance, I'll use it as a pure example, right? We moved from single-use condiment packages to more pump stations, right? Well, pump stations in COVID may not necessarily be the right approach either, because you don't want to have 50 people touching the same pump, right? But that doesn't mean that we would go directly back to single-use packets. Maybe there is another approach. Maybe we will now have to look at maybe single-handedly serving sizes of actual condiments as part of the buffet line. These are just some things that we're actually working through now. Nothing has been set in stone, but it's something like that we are having to look at and make sure that whatever our healthy return to service plan dictates, that we are making sure that our sustainability goals and processes either can be tweaked or will have to be changed on what we do. So that's kind of where we start with that. And, it's one of those things that that you heard in the video, and I think I started out. The only constant in life is change, and making sure that you can change with it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think right now we are so far along the path with the sustainable technologies. I don't see it going back. And as a matter of fact, if COVID has taught us anything, it's we can't afford to slide back. We have to build this into our budgets going forward. This is a matter of our future. It's very, very important. And I don't see us ever going back to, just inconspicuous waste the way that I think a number of us of a certain age can remember the world being. It has to change. It just has to. So again, good on you for being very much a part of that. And I'm just going to say thank you right now, Nick, for being on our program, for enlightening us to the sustainable practices of your Royal Caribbean Group and all of your associated lines and holdings. And we look forward to seeing you again. And we look forward to getting back on the water again and getting back out onto one of your ships. So do take care, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Joyce. Thanks for having me, and thanks for having this actual platform, because this is really important conversations.
Thank you. And I wanted to mention before you all leave right now that on August 26th at 1 o'clock, please join us for our next Sustainable Livecast. And this is going to feature Pam Hoffey, who is Managing Director of Avalon Waterways. So we are now going to the rivers, and not just rivers in Europe. Avalon covers a great big swath of the country, of the world. And it's Europe, Asia, Egypt, South America, a global rivers are what we're going to be speaking about with Pam Hoffey on August 26th at 1 p.m. So please join us. Please like us on social media. Please forward our invitation to others and friends. Please join us in our mission for sustainability and live sustainably. Have a good week.